I'm going to review some of the actions taken over the past 5 years for each of our program areas. And then I'll wrap up with a summary of the status of sea lampreys in Lake Michigan. So lampricide control continues to be our primary method of controlling sea lampreys throughout the Great Lakes. Here you'll see a graph of our control field days over time. In the past 5 years, we've averaged approximately over 2,200 field days, and this has increased over time. So part of this increase in lampricide control field days is due to efforts to enhance treatments. We have done this by optimizing timing of treatments, scheduling them in optimal times of the year, taking advantage of higher water in the spring, and sometimes those fall monsoons do help too. Also, with timing, we have extended some of our lampricide banks to maintain minimum lethal concentrations and have an effective treatment. Also, we've increased our secondary treatments. Those are treatments that are conducted at the same time as the mainstream, hitting backwaters with lampricides as well as rivulets in order to not have dilution of the mainstream bank, as well as hitting those areas so that the larval lampreys do not find any areas to hide in and survive. So this reduces the residuals during a treatment. Residuals are those that would survive. Also, we've increased our lentic treatments over time. And geographic efficiencies. Geographic efficiencies are scheduled into our regular treatment schedule when we see that a stream that is a producer stream that is small is geographically located near a larger ranked stream. So our staff would take advantage of that, and the cost of the treatment is minimized because the staff are already in the area, and so they can pick that up. Also, with lampricide control, we receive assistance from staff from other program areas, including larval assessment and adult assessment. And another enhancement has been the targeted treatment strategies, in which I'll talk about in the next slide. So over the past 5 years, we have treated 131 streams, 20 of which were treated in 2015, and 13 lentic area treatments were conducted, 3 of which were conducted in 2015. So I spoke about targeted treatments. We have treated streams under this strategy in 2012 and 2013 as an extension of what we had called the North Channel Strategy. So it extended into the northern area of Lake Michigan. 2014 and 2015, we treated our largest producers. And for a total of 26 streams and 5 lentic areas were treated under this strategy. Another part of sea lamprey control are barriers. Barriers are our only alternative control that is fully implemented into the program. Currently, we have 15 barriers, 5 of which are purpose-built, and 10 have been built by others but serve as lamprey barriers during spawning migration. Here you'll see a map of barriers that have had no modifications over the past 5 years. The Pier Marquette is the only barrier that has been removed during this time period, and that was removed in 2014, decommissioned in 2015. 2 barriers here, the Little Manistee and the Grand River barrier, we have plans to modify. And Trail Creek barrier was the only new construction over the last 5 years. And a modification was made to the fish ladder during 2014. These other streams had some other work done on them, or there are plans. So the Fox River had a metal screen repaired on that dam. The Kewanee and the Boardman had some stop logs replaced and repaired. The White and the Manistee Rivers, we have plans for new constructions, and we look forward to that in the future. So the barrier team has conducted 651 site visits over the last 5 years to barriers for inspection and maintenance. Of those, 97 visits were conducted during 2015. These visits, these inspections of the barriers, the data was then entered into a barrier inventory system database in order to help with decision making in the future if it came to barrier removals and also inspections and maintenance. Consultations for barrier removals were done over the 5-year period in which 64 consultations occurred. This has been increasing over time. As you can see, in 2011, there were 3 sites where consultations were done. In 2015, that increased up to 22 sites for barrier removals. So in 2015, we concurred on 17 barrier removal proposals. 4 are still pending, and 1 is conditional, and that is the Boardman River Sabin Dam. So some other alternative controls that are being investigated include juvenile trapping in the fall, and those are to collect the newly metamorphosed out-migrating animals, attractants, repellents, nest destruction, and also investigations into new trapping designs. So moving into larval assessment team directs and evaluates control efforts. They rank the streams for treatment, basically telling the control unit what to treat, and then finding the distribution of lamprey in the stream. So then telling the control unit where to start treating. So in 2015, a total of 20 ranking surveys were conducted, and those were to rank streams for treatment against other streams in the Great Lakes. 45 detection surveys were done, and I'm happy to announce that no new producers were discovered last year in the Lake Michigan Basin. Numerous distribution surveys were done, as well as treatment evaluations, and those were done in 22 streams and 4 lentic areas to evaluate the effectiveness of lampricide treatments that occurred either early that year or in the previous year. Barrier evaluations were done, 12 of which were on 12 tribs of the Boardman River, and habitat assessments were conducted throughout the basin. And thousands of larvae were collected for researchers throughout the year. So here's a bubble chart that shows the large producers of larvae in Lake Michigan. So those are the Muskegon, Ford, Manistee, Pere Marquette, and the Manistique. So the top 4 combined contribute approximately 2 to 3 million larvae, and that adds up to over half of the production of larvae in Lake Michigan. The larval assessment team has also been involved in production potential above critical barriers, working in cooperation with the barrier team. They evaluate production by quantifying larval and spawner habitats, as well as conducting CPUE electrofishing, using native lampreys as surrogates for sea lampreys. During 2015, 3 streams had assessments conducted to look for production potential. Those are the Root River, Oak Creek, and Menominee River. No native or sea lampreys were found, and larval and spawner habitat was sparse. So for spawning phase assessment, we have moved, originally we were with the lake-wide estimate, and the lake-wide estimate was a combination of model predicted and mark recapture data. And now we've made a move to mark recapture estimates in index streams. So in 2015, 9,002 lampreys were captured at 8 sites. Those index streams are listed here: the Carp Lake Outlet, Boardman River, Betsy, Big Manistee, St. Joe, Trail Creek, Peshtigo River, and Manistique River. And the Manistique River during 2015 had the largest spawner run catch. So spawning phase assessment is used to estimate spawner abundance. And it's one of the primary metrics used to evaluate our control actions. Here's a graph that shows adult abundance index on the left and the lake-wide estimate on the right over time. So the green line is our target. If we're looking at the index, the target would be 25,000. The lake-wide estimate would be 47,000. And here you can see over the last 5 years, The spawner estimate has declined, and in 2015 was below target. So what we've seen is that as we've increased our control effort, we have seen a decrease in adult abundance. So lake-wide wounding on lake trout for parasitic phase animals is also used to evaluate the success of our program. Generally follows the same trend as the spawner abundance. So as you see here, the adult abundance is in blue, the wounding rate is the red, and the yellow is the target line. So during 2015, we saw that both the spawner abundance and the wounding rate were below targets. So parasitic phase attachment data is collected by charter fishermen and provided by the Michigan DNR and the Wisconsin DNR. Data demonstrates a similar declining trend as the spawner data, and they also demonstrate the importance of primary hosts other than lake trout, and the challenge that changes in the abundance of the abundance and size structure of host populations may have on interpretation of wounding data. So risk management, that's another major part of our program. The risk management team addresses environmental and non-target issues related to sea lamprey control activities. They coordinate with federal, state, and tribal regulatory agencies to minimize risk to non-target organisms. And then we report to agencies on any adverse effects to non-targets, primarily the EPA. We go through Section 7 reviews, and this is an example of one of those reviews. The snuffbox mussel is federally listed species, and we'll be treating the Grand River in Ohio this year, and so they had a concern about the snuffbox, and so the snuffbox used the log perch as a host fish, and their Glochidia insist on the gills, and so we were asked if we could treat the stream prior to that time when that would occur, and actually that's what we prefer. We would rather go earlier because we would have more water. So that's just an example of what we do. We consult with other agencies, and then we schedule our treatments also that way. We also had lab and streamside bioassays right next to the Peshtigo River, and this was looking at an alternative lampricide treatment with an interrupted bank. This was also to see if we could minimize our effects on lake sturgeon by having the treatment run for 7 hours, then stop it for 6, start it for 7. We wanted to see what the effect would be not only on lake sturgeon, but also on sea lampreys. Could we be effective in treating these lampreys under some kind of alternative lampricide strategy? And right now, looking at the data, the results are not promising, both for sea lampreys as far as being an effective treatment or for lake sturgeon survival. Another study that the risk management team was involved in over the past 5 years was a niclosamide concentration field test with Upper Midwest Environmental Science Center biologists and chemists. They looked at concentrations of niclosamide in the sediment as well as the water column in lentic areas off of Hog Island Creek and the Peshtigo River. So here's a graph of estimated sea lamprey-induced mortality on lake trout by management unit. And we heard from Chuck earlier, and I think Chuck had more recent data than I did. But as you can see, there is a declining trend. So in summary, sea lamprey control continues to be a foundation for a diverse, thriving fisheries. We've seen sea lamprey abundance and wounding have declined. And in 2015, both the abundance estimate for sea lampreys and the wounding were well below target. So some strategies to meet the fish community objectives: increased lampricide control, to support this increased lampricide control with assessment, continue our targeted treatments, and we'll see decreased spawner abundance. We also want to see advanced alternative controls, particularly a barrier in the Manistee River, and continued involvement in barrier removal discussions on the 6th Street Dam in the Grand River. And we'd also like to see advanced alternative controls and trap technology. Another major thing here is develop improved metrics to measure program success, particularly with fish community wounding. And so we continue as a program to strive every day to drive those sea lamprey numbers down, and everyone takes their job very seriously and very passionately. With that, I would like to thank a few people here: Steve Leonard, Gene Adams, Ted Treska, Mike Siefkes, Scott Grender, and the DFO and Fish and Wildlife field staff who have helped drive those numbers way down.